Hi, I'm David Gale, and this is ACTRA Spotlight, where we're building the Canadian star system one podcast at a time. Joanne Vannicola is an Emmy award-winning actor, a published author, a celebrated activist, and a tap dancer. Joanne came out as non-binary in their 2019 memoir, and they've been fighting for LGBTQ plus rights nearly their whole life. Being true to themselves sometimes meant a film wardrobe call became a war room. Have a listen. Hello, Joe.
Hello, David.
So nice to talk to you. So let's talk about Joe Vannicola and your life apart from COVID-19. So your Wikipedia page states that you came out as non-binary in 2019. In your memoir, All We Knew But Couldn't Say. And the Wikipedia page uses the pronoun they
Wow.
to refer to you throughout. Now we'll get to your shocking, heartbreaking, but ultimately hopeful memoir in a bit. But I want to start off with a question that people maybe don't know the answer to is what does non-binary mean to you?
You know, it seems to evolve for me, to be honest, because I think my own expression of gender keeps evolving itself as I carry on in my life and move forward in age. But to be non-binary to me means not to be inside the sort of construct of the gender binaries that we've all lived through our entire lives. So this very, extreme masculine here and extreme feminine here in terms of expression of gender. And it's not just that, though. It's not just the physical or how we look or how we carry ourselves or how we feel inside ourselves. I think in some ways it's also cultural and political. And I never fit into the binary. I never, was femme or feminine. I was always sort of butchier, soft butt, whatever you want to call it. But I never had the language to describe who I was, how my gender until which ended up being non-binary, and that is so very recent. But when that language was created, I felt like I had a home for my gender, which I'd never experienced before because the culture is so steeped in the binary, in masculine and feminine, that there's no space for any of us on the spectrum of gender in between that or beyond those
so just to boil it down, you don't feel one or the other all the time, some of the time?
You mean masculine or feminine?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess sometimes I might feel a little bit more masculine than other times. And not as much feminine, but I'd say in the middle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I never related to women on a cisgendered level or at all, and I never saw reflections of myself in the culture, particularly the film industry, not just on television and film, but also in audition rooms and in social circles, and it just didn't exist, and I always felt like I didn't fit ever, like I never fit.
And yet you worked a lot and you got parts. So how did you make it work for yourself doing parts when not feeling like one or the other?
It was very hard. Like internally, I struggled all the time, and I don't think anybody would know how hard that struggle was, because I couldn't really find a place to discuss it. I didn't know how to, I guess, because the platform didn't exist for that conversation.
Right.
But I worked really hard, and I never was not prepared for an audition. I always memorized every line. I practiced. I'm a little slower sometimes, actually. Like some people are very fast at it. I'm not. So I have to repeat. I was never late for anything. I just worked really, really hard no matter what, because I knew that the hurdle or the obstacle would be bigger for me. And because I was always the lone person who looked like me walking into an audition room, or short hair, and obviously out, not a lesbian femme, not lipstick femme, not any of that. So it was hard. It was hard. And when I got the roles, it was a celebration, but hard.
And you got the roles. Were the roles sometimes not what you had auditioned for necessarily? Like you're coming in sort of as a non-binary person, and with the auditioning sort of 20 years ago, I'm certain that you weren't auditioning for a non-binary part.
No.
So how did that work for you when you got the role?
Well, yeah, that was complex because, usually things would happen like in places like wardrobe rooms, right? Where there'd be racks of dresses and skirts. And I'd go, oh, okay. So my biggest nightmare would always be going to the wardrobe room. That was like going into battle. It was battle. So I'd have to walk into those rooms and I go, no skirts for me. No, I won't be wearing a dress. And the looks on their faces would be like, oh yeah, no, you're going to wear a dress. And by the end of it, it was like, yeah, no, I'm not. Not going to happen. So I'll come back, maybe do a second fitting. Like these pants, like that shirt, like that vest. And then I'd suggest things. How about these? Or I'd say, hey, I brought some of my own clothes along just in case. Like that became a habit. Yeah, like a regular wardrobe war experience. And
were the producers brought in ever, or the directors?
Yeah, well, I nearly didn't get a part once because of that. I was quite young. I was like 20, 21.
Well, we can talk about that. We can talk about that. So that's from, I know this story, but
Right.
you won an Emmy Award for this, correct? Okay, so you won an Emmy Award for Outstanding Performance in a Children's Special in Maggie's Secret in 1994, directed by
Al Waxman.
Al Waxman. Okay, so if you wanted, I've read this about that in your book. So you want to talk about this experience?
Yeah, I did my job as an actor, and they hired me, and it was great. Everything was really exciting. And then I went into the wardrobe room. And again, skirts, dresses, all these things. And I said, no, I'm not going to wear that. I'm not going to wear that mini skirt. Sorry, that's not wearing a mini skirt. No, I can't do. And,
what was the character?
She was a young woman who had two abusive parents who were alcoholic, and her dad was tried to seduce her sexually and tried to come onto her sexually, and so there's a lot of trauma with this kid. And then also she had a little brother she was taking care of, and just dealing with the alcoholism and the attempted
Abuse
by the father. So it was an intense little school program, after hours, movie that kind of dealt with a lot of important issues for young people at that time. Yeah, at any time really. I mean, it would still be if it were to play today. Yeah, but they're probably all just on video cassette somewhere stuck in a closet.
And you auditioned for the part, and they had an idea of what this character would look like.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, I had very long hair when I was 20. I had very long hair, and I ended up getting brought in to a private room to have a private meeting with Al Waxman, who said to me, "You're gonna wear the miniskirt." I said, "I'm not wearing it." He said, "Oh yes, you are." And then I was like, "No, I'm not doing it." He said, "Joe, they're gonna fire you. They're gonna fire you, and you're gonna lose the job.
Jeez.
I know you don't want to do it, but you're gonna wear it. You gotta do it, or you don't get the job." And it wasn't his decision. It was the network and the producers, and that was that, right? They were the ones in control and in power, and I didn't have a say. So that was really hard because there was no language at that point in time to discuss gender and how I, felt inside my skin. And it very emotional. Like I would get very upset on a regular basis, and I had nowhere to go and no one to talk to about it. Like literally, there wasn't a soul I could talk to. Not an agent, not a casting agent, uh, not anybody in the industry, because there wasn't anybody who looked like me. There wasn't even any lesbians out on screen and video or movies at that point. Like there was no one. So I was very alone.
But you didn't look like you at the time. You had long hair, so you wouldn't
That's
even have
it.
been able to be identified, possibly, maybe by your what you would wear out on the street. Was it pants and
Yeah,
shirts and
I was kind of like a tomboy butchy girl. Like, you know, I would wear jeans all the time. I don't think I ever not wore jeans and or jean jackets or leather jackets. And, you know, I was kind of a tough girl with long hair, like a rocker chick.
and
You know,
dating boys?
oh no, I was already out. Like I came out in my teens,
Right.
and I had a boyfriend as a kid that I loved, a first love. But I came out in my late teens and uh, full on out after that. So, you know, by the time my mid 20s hit, I was definitely out and then out in the industry. And then a new wave of struggle kicked in.
A different type of out.
Yeah.
Right. Well, let's go back in time a little bit. So, you were originally from Montreal, and you started performing at 8 on
Yes.
Sesame Street.
Yes.
On Sesame Street, so, what are your memories from that experience?
You know, that was so much fun because I was just a little kid and I loved Sesame Street like most kids of our generation and even today who love Sesame Street. So the idea that I get to be on Sesame Street was just a fantasy for like a child dream fantasy. So it was really fun. I remember going into the sound studios and doing a lot of voice work for Sesame Street, and then really silly videos in the park where, you know, I'd tumble over cameras and do flips and cartwheels and run around and play and just be a kid. Like it was like this ability to just be a kid, and there were no uh, that was all it was. Improvise in the studio with the voice stuff, and just be a kid and play on the outside.
And these were sections that were put into the bigger Sesame Street. It was the sort of
Yeah,
local sections that would come in. Yeah, segments.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And did you get to meet Jim Henson?
No, I didn't get to meet all those big guys, but you know,
No.
when I would go to the studio and record in Montreal, at the time it was a CBC studio, I'm pretty sure. You know, that was exciting because as a little child, you know, you're in an environment that's like exciting with all this equipment and these big screens, and you get to look at images and videos of Sesame Street, and it fills you with joy, right? So
Mm,
it was a place of joy when I was a kid because I didn't have a lot of joy outside of the world of make believe. So the world of
right.
make believe really was joyful.
Now, your mom was, and she plays very heavily in the book, throughout the book, and it's a quite a challenging relationship, to say the least. But she was kind of the personification of a stage mother, a stage mom, right?
Oh yeah, not
All,
classification. Now she was
right, right.
full on stage mom. Yeah.
And would she go with you to these gigs, for the Sesame Street gigs?
Yeah, I mean, she would definitely take me to auditions, and sometimes she would try to, you know, be around as much as she possibly could in the process. And sometimes, you know, they would say, "Oh no, just Joanne."
Did you like those moments?
Yeah, I love those because you knew the other adults knew, I guess, who the stage moms were at the
Mhm.
time, probably, and they were like, "Yeah, no, just the kids in the studio," sort of thing. So, you know, things like that. Uh,
Mhm.
but I mean, I don't know if that would fly today, though, given there are probably rules and regulations for children, and
Oh,
but
yes,
there's some safeties, right? You have to. I mean, it is a work environment too, so you know,
absolutely. Parents need to be, their guardian needs to be there at least, and with the
yeah,
eyesight, within eyesight of the child,
yeah.
of the minor.
But then no, there weren't any rules and regulations when I was growing up.
Right, right. It was a different time. So
Is
I
it
read I read that tap dancing was your first love. Is
definitely?
tap dancing still in your life?
You know, I haven't tap danced for many, many years, but I still have tap shoes. And literally once in a while, I will put on those tap shoes and I will do a little triple time step in my
You will.
piece. Yeah, oh yeah. I do love to tap. It's like literally, if I could physically do it, I would probably try to create a show with tap in it or something. Just I love tap so much. To me,
And you
it's
have a space where you can do it?
no, but I do have this like vinyl floor. I could not vinyl, but like this other fake floor I could throw over the wood that works really, really well if I want to tap. Inner secrets.
Hmm.
What
Right.
Joe does at home alone.
she, she, they tap. They tap.
Yeah, they're tapping.
Yeah, it's challenging because we talked about your relationship with your mom, and I don't know if we want to get into details of that in this particular podcast. I think it was not a happy childhood, even though you were doing stuff that you loved, like tap dancing and acting, and did you use your performance as like a refuge?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think for any kids who, I mean, I grew up in a home with child abuse. And so it's all in the memoir, which I wrote, which is why we're talking about this. And people might wonder why we're randomly having a discussion about it. But because I wrote the memoir, All We Knew But Couldn't Say, I reveal a lot of my history in it, as well as the politics later. But I grew up in a very violent home. And so I needed escape because at home it was a place for me. It was a place of fear and never knowing what was going to happen, and there wasn't enough nurturing, and there were a lot of things I didn't get at home. And the place I did get it was through acting and dancing, and the people who would teach me those things and love me, um, and not want anything from me, and would give me praise when I excelled, and all of those good things that children need and want to soak up. And so I tried to absorb every second of that joy, love, teaching, nurturing that I could get outside of the home through the arts.
And you were involved with different theater companies, and you were entrenched in that. So you were getting a certain amount of nurturing that you weren't getting at home.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the other children were were fun to be with too, because we all had similar likes. And
Right.
certainly at school, I was kind of useless I could not study. I couldn't concentrate. It just felt too hard for me. I really struggled at school. But I think too, that's a response to trauma that most children who have experienced trauma or child abuse tend to have some struggles sometimes learning and being in educational environments. Yeah.
Right. And you moved to Toronto also as a teenager?
I did, yeah.
To go to attend school here?
Yeah, I went to a high school here called the Toronto High School of Performing Arts. And I lived with this young man who was 18 at the time. We had both been in a theater troupe together. You know him. I'm not going to name him though because he's a different name in the book.
How old were you when you moved to Toronto on your own?
I was going on 14, or 15, but I was 14, and he was 18, and we were kind of just roommates in this apartment, so we kind of didn't really associate with each other. It was more like, hey, ho, hey, hi, bye kind of thing, right? So, and that went on for about a year. But it was a really hard moment in time for me because I was sent to a new city. I didn't know anybody really. I didn't have any friends. I didn't like Toronto. And the school grew on me, but it just wasn't, I just felt displaced. And it was hard to be alone at that age and not know how to live, really. I struggled, yeah.
And I know from the book that there were some people at the school who were helpful to you, though.
Oh, yeah.
Guiding you and...
Yeah, this amazing teacher. Her name is Kate McKenzie. She's actually back in Australia now. She's from Australia. She's lived everywhere, Africa, Canada, all kinds of places as a teacher and principal. But she gave me so much love, and she really helped me, particularly with reading and writing, which at that time I was behind, and the other students. And she gave me so much energy and love, and I really respected her so deep because she really helped keep me going in a lot of ways, just by her presence. And even though I think for young people, not all young people need to have somebody 24 hours a day, just sometimes it's you know, a person you meet once a week, or somebody at school, or a counselor, or some beautiful moment where somebody treats you with dignity and respect. And, you know, all of those moments add up that fill you up and help keep you on the path and alive, really, especially if you're dealing with mental health issues or depression, or, you know, suicide ideation, or any of those things that are very difficult for young people who are struggling, right? And I had all of those things. And so every moment that I crossed with somebody who showed me real love and real respect and joy and nurturing helped remove, you know, bit by bit, those sort of harmful blocks.
So, you know, you talked about how you had a difficult time in school and with writing and reading. What must it feel like for you now that you are actually a published author, recognized published author?
Yeah, so that was one of the biggest accomplishments for me in my adult life, because I often struggled with writing, and I had to go to a lot of creative writing classes to just learn sentence structure, let alone writing a piece. It's like I was literally learning how to write through creative writing classes. And I would get help from individuals as well who would, you know, help me form paragraphs. And it was a lot of learning because I was behind. So for me, I think the biggest gift this year was the recent, I was shortlisted for a Kobo Emerging Writer Prize 2020. And so I think that announcement we made in June sometime. And it's okay because there are 20 brilliant authors that I get to share that honor with. And for me, it was just a moment of accomplishment for having faced my challenges as a young writer, or not that young writer, but and managed to accomplish an important piece that psychologically it took some time to get through, and to be here on this side of it. So I just think if you're writing out there, just keep writing, because that's really, you know, all you have to do to try is just keep trying to get somewhere. Just keep going. Don't give up. And for me, queer content is really where I want to put my voice in my writing. So book 2 includes writing about LGBTQ youth, and my screenwriting now is all about, you know, intersectional lives with a focus on LGBTQ people. And I think that's the way I'll move forward as a writer, is by writing those things that I know and that I'm passionate about, and hopefully try to be a really good ally while I'm at it.
Fantastic. Yeah. And then you went on to, you know, start having a career as a performer, as on screen and on stage, and doing significant work on stage and on screen as well. And you know, now you have over 70 credits in film and television and multiple nominations, and you won an Emmy Award for this Al Waxman piece, The Maggie Secret. You've worked with some great people, Denis Arcand in Love and Human, Brad Fraser's Love and Human Remains. What was that like, working with Denis Arcand? You know, coming back to a Quebecer.
Yeah, I love Denis so much. We had a lot of arguments back and forth, but we were friends. We became friends very quickly, and we would giggle like crazy together. We would drink wine together. We would have fun together. You know,
the content was kind of dark.
Oh yeah, the content was very dark, but you know, it was Love and Human Remains. It was a Brad Fraser play. And like, it was the second piece I had done of Brad Fraser's. The first thing was a play called Wolf Boy with Keanu Reeves when I was 16. It was during those, you know, first couple of years, and that was really dark because I was playing a ghost, like a dead girl, right? So
on stage.
So every night it was screaming and this and that, and it was just all this intensity. But Love and Human Remains was awesome because I got to play a lesbian for the first time in film, and that was so exciting to me. I was so grateful to Brad, and then I was grateful to Denis for hiring me. I came out to Denis. I was like, yeah, I am, and no, I'm not going to do this, and no, I'm not going to do that, because that's how it was. And he was like, yeah, and I would do it anyway. But he was fabulous, and I just to this day adore him, and I've become friends with him and stayed friends with him lifelong.
And you did another film for him as well.
Yeah, I was in his other English film called Stardom with Jessica Paré, and there's so many people that were in that movie. So many people, like I can't remember. There's a whole list of amazing actors. And then I did a cameo in his this film that he won an Oscar in, but I didn't do anything. I just showed up at the counter one day and hung out with Denis for a day and got to play a cameo in his film. But he's been really good to me too, and really gracious, and I appreciate his intellect and his humor. He's definitely one of a kind.
Mm-hmm. So you've come to a place in your career now where you're getting to play characters that more reflect what you're like in real life. In some of these, you were in two slasher series, two different ones, and working with very gay positive Aaron Martin, the producer, showrunner for that. Talk about what it's like actually working with roles like you did in Love and Human Remains, where your characters are a bit more relatable.
Yeah, well, I the curve in my career came when I had numerous sort of, I would say, heated arguments with people in casting and with my agents about being a lesbian, and really not wanting to be misgendered. And at the time, there was no non-binary verbiage, but language. But that was very difficult. So that was at least a 10-year struggle, if not more. And I've lost a couple of agents through the process of it because I was committed to trying to be authentic to myself. But doing that meant that I would work less and that people would drop me. And, there was a lot of struggle in those years. But also I was building an internal strength that I don't know at the time I could have said was an internal strength. Looking back on those years, I go, wow, I was really strong. Stupid, maybe, but there was a strength in hanging on to myself that I think propelled me and kept me moving. And most people may have left the industry, but I didn't want to leave it. I felt like I'm not going to quit something that I've worked hard for my entire life because you don't want me in it as I am. I'm just going to keep doing what I do. And maybe one day the pendulum will swing. And maybe one day I will help that happen. I didn't know, but I did everything I could, right? So working, it sort of went up and down in terms of the roller coaster of auditions. Sometimes there would be none for a year. Sometimes, there would be too many. And then other times there would be the dreaded wardrobe room.
Yeah.
But every time I made sure people knew I was a lesbian and that I identified as kind of soft butch, so they would get the idea that I wasn't very femme. But now I just get to say what I am, which is non-binary, right? And so people are starting to understand what non-binary is, which is I'm grateful for now. It's taken 20, 30 years.
Do you get people saying, well, what is that? Like what we did up the top of the thing? What does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think people understand it still. I think people are starting to understand transgender. They understand male, female, but they don't quite understand non-binary because you're not trying to fit into the binary. I find oftentimes, there are these extremes that happen where people are still trying to fit into the binary. But many of us never wanted to and never will. And so I think people don't understand who we are. And non-binary, it's like when we started to use the word cisgendered. Lots of people don't understand that either, and they hate it. Like, what is that, cis? What do we have to use that term?
Well, explain what you think cis is, or what cis is.
Well, cis is when your your sex at birth is your how you express yourself, your sex assignment as
your genitalia. I can say that on Spotlight.
I'm going to read about genitalia.
Well, in sex, that type of sex?
Yeah, yes. Because for, heterosexual, cisgendered people in terms of sex, will remain that potentially for the rest of their lives. And that's what they are. They fit into the binary. And, but then there's also gender, right? There's sex and then there's gender, right, and gender expression. And, my sex is the same, but I'm not, gonna have transition and change, get a penis suddenly and get rid of my vagina. I like my vagina, so I hope that's okay to say. But who I am and how I express my gender is A, what you see on the outside, but B, how I feel about it internally. And I think that shifts, right? As I was saying, like it changes as I get older. And, maybe I will, change some things up at some point. I don't know. But, that's my decision. And it's anybody who feels that they're not in the right body or that the culture isn't respecting them for how they express their gender has a right to speak up and to kind of maybe help educate people as well, because I think it's new in terms of language, and I think there are some great people out there who are trying to understand it, to do their best, and to use the pronouns they, them, their, z, all those things that are new as well. And, it's hard. Everybody stumbles. I stumble sometimes too. I forget people, I sometimes make the mistake of saying she instead of they, or people do that with me. And, I like they, them. It reflects the gender I'm trying to, that I've been expressing for the last 30 years. So it makes sense for me. And hopefully we'll be able to, spread awareness culturally, not just, on the ground, but also in our work, in our industry. So that there can be more work for us.
You think that the industry is catching up to, no? Is it your hope that we can educate the industry?
I really hope we can. Yeah, definitely. I feel like there are many of us who have lived the experience and gone through the trials and tribulations of gender and sexuality, misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, and all those lessons have been, for me, those lessons are valuable, and I want to use all those lessons and all those years to try and propel things forward in the culture and try to make some changes in our industry as much as I can, not just as an individual, but also within the queer committee that we've created in the union, outACTRAto, and beyond it through other sources of work that I'm trying to do out there, through my writing, screenwriting, and book writing as well. So, the book number 2 that I'm working on now, and it's part of my goal. It's my passion. It's human rights and LGBTQ rights and youth rights. Those things really matter deeply to me, and I can't imagine living my life without being an activist and without trying to use my life to make change.
So you've said, and I'm quoting you, it was your younger, I'm not quoting you, you said that it was your younger years that you developed a sense of justice and desire for equity. How did that come about, do you think?
I knew what was happening to me was wrong when I was a kid, but you have nowhere to go for help when you're a kid. Then when I was a young girl and teenager, I marched in the first International Year of the Child in 1978 with a placard saying children's rights are human rights up and down the streets. And that lit a fire in me that I didn't even know existed. And from there, I started doing political and social theater as a teen. And we were writing stuff that people weren't writing at the time. We were writing stuff about abortion, about being queer, about racism. We were like touring these plays to places like in the Yukon where, you didn't talk about those things at all in the 80s. And that desire, that the desire for equity and nonviolence and freedom just propelled me and inspired me to carry on with activism and learning as much as I could about as many people as I could at that point in time, even though I was struggling deeply as a teen in my own life. I was absorbing as much as I could about human rights.
At 13, presumably.
Yeah. I mean, yes. I mean, you know, at the time we didn't call it human rights, but it was just youth rights and what's right. And I had a real sense of what I thought was right and wrong at the time. And I was pretty strong about that, as most teens are. And,
Absolutely.
I was speaking out against war, and I was, into peace and nonviolence. And, that changed a little as I got older. Things.
You learned about life. Real
I
life.
learned about life.
Yeah.
I had fantasies that the life would change, that once I discovered feminism, I was so happy. And I thought, wow, I can't wait till I'm an adult, because by the time I'm an adult, the world will have changed so much, and I will have equity and equal rights, and in every place of life. And then I grew up and I learned that would not be the case.
Wow.
So, yeah.
But since then, you have really used your power for good. That is for certain. You founded a not-for-profit organization to raise awareness for child abuse called Youth Out Loud. You were a prominent campaigner for same-sex marriage in Canada. And more recently, you won the 2019 Leslie Yao Award for Volunteerism from AFBS. So how is that translated to the work that you brought to the ACTRA Toronto LGBTQ plus outACTRAto committee? Wow, that was a long one.
A lot going on there.
Yeah, too much. Too much.
I think because there was so much fire inside for me around, I was really fed up, to be honest, of the misogyny and the homophobia. And, what
in the industry?
In the industry.
Okay.
Yeah, and definitely in the industry. And I think what just sort of came before that was the Me Too movement. And everything just kind of blew up at the same time in a way. It was all happening at the same time. I remember wanting to, start this committee, and we had talked about that. And then the Me Too movement, kicked in, and there was a lot going on. But I just felt determined to try and make a dent somehow in our industry, at least in this city of Toronto,
right.
By outreaching with each other in the industry. They're trying to reach queer people who were actors, and to form this committee and to talk about what are our issues, what do we want. What do we want to do? What do we want people to know? How do we want to contribute to change? What can we do to help not just ourselves, but the greater culture and the next generation of not just actors, but children and people who see reflections of themselves or need to see reflections of themselves, authentic representation of who we truly are. And so that today still is like this big fire in me, and it probably will be until I'm no longer here. I had to learn the ropes a little bit at ACTRA. It took a little learning. I'm still getting there, Emmy. I'm an old activist from the hood, so a little learning. But I think we're making some headway. We've done some amazing things. Like we've created our PSA.
What talk about that?
Queer Your Stories, and it's a beautiful PSA by
public service announcement.
Public service announcement. It's about 4 minutes long, and the wide range of diverse sort of voices who are LGBTQ plus, and I just think it's a beautiful piece, and we're trying to get that out to other people as much as we can. It's played in a couple of cinemas, and it's gone to the Berlin Festival, the LGBTQ Festival. It plays in the cinema in Provincetown regularly with the movies, so it's got some reach. And we're working on educational materials now, hopefully that will, go out into the industry soon about LGBTQ performers and how you can be an ally, and maybe, how you can start to think differently if you're an agent or a casting agent, a screenwriter, or a director or producer, and the things that you can say to us perhaps in the room, or, when you're putting the breakdown together, what kind of language you're using and who are you really trying to cast, and maybe we can broaden the horizons and stop thinking about the binary, right?
Right.
Stop thinking about that. Stop thinking about heterosexual as the default. And there's so many things that we can impact. And so we're trying to do piece by piece, the next piece. What can we do this year? And so this year, those are some of the pieces we're doing in our committees: educational materials, the PSA, and also, unfortunately, because of COVID, it couldn't move forward, but we created a short competition with the Inside Out Film Festival where a queer, team, filmmakers could, get a piece produced and that would play at the Inside Out Film Festival. So we've done that this year as well. So I'm really proud of what we've done so far. And hopefully we'll get to do more.
And so your dream is that somewhere down in 5 years in the future, you'll be able to go to an audition where the audition call is completely understandable, fair, will reach all manner of gender and binary, etc.
Yeah, I think we've already had heterosexual, white, cisgendered people dominating the industry. Let's switch it up. Nobody's going to lose out here, just because we're opening the gates to people who are non-binary or transgender, two-spirit, Black, Indigenous, Southeast Asian, whatever it is. Let's open up the gates so that people across races and genders and sexualities can audition for any part, because that's how we make something more rich and more reflective and more exciting and new, because we've seen the other forever. So let's just blow it all up. There's always going to be roles for white, cisgendered, hetero people. So that's not going to end. We're just going to expand.
Well, you have to keep on doing what you're doing, because one person at a time, you're changing the industry. And we appreciate the dynamic energy that you're putting towards our industry and the union and necessarily non-conforming people all across this country and in the world. That's pretty broad, but it's got to start one person at a time. So thank you very much for this and for doing what you're doing. You're an inspiration. That was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks, David.
Well, it's safe to say that Joanne Vannicola is a force of nature, and nature is changing. I'm David Gale. ACTRA Spotlight is produced by Cass Enright and recorded this time virtually at home. You can get Spotlight on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to like us, to subscribe, and keep watching Canadian. And please stay safe.